Okay, so this week, Module 7, we're going to be looking at assessments, assessing student learning, how to find out if the students have learned what you have attempted to teach them. So, our objectives for this week: define assessment, differentiate between measuring and evaluating student learning, explain different purposes of assessment, including diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment, and the purpose of standardized testing, and identify different tools used to assess student learning, and describe the principles of assessment: fairness, reliability, validity, and describe how to evaluate and grade student performance. So, what is assessment? Assessment is measurement and evaluation that are related to each other. Assessments have three purposes: diagnostic, formative, and summative. So, diagnostic assessment is used to determine a student's areas of strength and areas in need of improvement. And then once they start to learn, that's formative assessment. It allows the teacher to gauge how well the students are understanding the concept and content presented. And then summative assessment is the at the end of the unit to determine whether students how well students met the learning objectives for the unit. Teachers use formal and informal means to assess student learning. There are quite a few informal things that you do as you go along to determine whether students are getting it. One technique that I've heard of before and I've used is fist to five. Everybody give me a fist to five. And what that means is on a scale of 0 to 5, how well you understand what we just went over. If everybody's got 5 fingers up, hey, we're good. We're ready to move on. If everybody's got their fist up, that means nothing. I didn't understand one bit of this. So it tells you what you need to redo. And that's a great informal means of assessing student learning. Formal means tests, essays, those types of things can be used, which we'll be going over. Teachers also use inquiry, observation, analysis, testing to gather information, and there are standardized and teacher-made tests available. Assessment consists of two separate components: measurement and evaluation. Measurement is the collection of the data. Evaluation is a judging or assigning value to the data. Measurement requires a range of tools and takes place on a variety of levels. It might just be in your classroom, might be in your district, your state, your national or international levels. Standardized tests are tests that are standardized in the content and administration, including time limitations, scoring, and evaluation. And here in North Carolina, we have end of grade and end of course tests. End of grade are tests that are done from K through 8, and end of course tests are specific to a specific subject area. And those tests are statewide. And those tests are required by No Child Left Behind and various other initiatives that have been developed around the nation. Those standardized tests, teachers have to go through training every semester or every year, however often they are administered. There are rules about the teacher has to be walking around the room, cannot sit down. You have to take things off the walls that might be instructive content. There's a specific script that you have to read. Everybody reads the exact same thing. The tests are timed with specific breaks. Most of you have probably taken those type of tests in your life, and so you may remember those kind. There are 3 types of other tests: aptitude, achievement, and interest, personality, and attitude. Assessment is one of the principal tasks in the teaching process. It's used to measure your student progress, and it needs to be planned and aligned with your curriculum and teaching activities. So if we're looking at it in assessment and instruction and learning, you have your curricular goals, your expected learning outcomes, and your assessment task and your instructional activities should be leading to those learning outcomes. Instruction is not the same as assessment. These are two separate activities with two distinct purposes. Instruction helps students to master the concepts and skills, and assessment activities gather information on how well they've mastered the concepts and skills. Assessment can guide instruction, and you can use it to modify learning activities or curriculum. Purposes of assessment: diagnostic, formative, summative, and the standardized tests are all important types of purposes of assessment. With diagnostic assessment, we're looking for areas of strength and weakness, provides a starting point for instruction, and ascertains students' preparedness for a unit of study. Often it's done at the beginning of the year. This might be where you had a benchmark test or a test just to determine where you're starting. Formative assessment is carried out throughout a unit of study, estimates how well students are understanding concepts, evaluating learning activities. Are the teaching strategies effective? You're checking the pacing, and you're helping students prioritize the learning to determine what information is the most important. Summative assessment, as I said earlier, occurs at the end of the instructional unit, and it measures how many students met learning objectives and how well they met them. Standardized test, we talked about that already, aptitude test, achievement test, and teachers have to follow directions exactly. Formal assessments may be diagnostic, formative, and assessment. They occur at set dates. It can measure specific content. Informal assessment is anecdotal evidence of student work, occurs regularly but not systematically, and is your primary tool to collect data is observation. Fairness, reliability, and validity. A fair assessment is if no student has had an advantage because of ethnic or cultural background, race, gender, religious affiliation, no bias towards or against any individual or group of students. It's reliable because it's consistent data, and the results are consistent across students or over time. And validity is whether the information gathered actually measures what it was intended to measure. Does it match the knowledge taught and the knowledge assessed? Assessment tools should fit the learning objectives. The two most commonly used test item formats are selected response and constructed response. You've all had tests by this point. You know what those are. Selected response, those are what we call objective tests, and you would have a multiple choice or multiple selection. And they're very easy to score, fast and easy to collect information. Constructed response are those essay type questions where you have to recognize the correct response or responses from a list of possible answers. You draw on your prospective knowledge base to identify essential concepts. So those could be short answer, those could be essay type questions. Those usually take a considerable amount of time to grade, but can be very, very important to see the students' process. Authentic assessments ask students to provide evidence of learning, and that might be through demonstrations or exhibitions. It could be a portfolio, progress portfolio, something that is showing the students evidence of learning. In my online art studio classes, I require students to take pictures as they are working on a project. So I can see the different stages from the first stage to the second stage, the third stage, and so on, so that I can see the process that they've followed. And it helps me better understand the work that they're submitting. Rubrics are an excellent means of validity. It states the criteria and the standards for assessing the student performance. Grading authentic assessment requires a lot of thought. When you're trying to choose your assessment tools, first determine what kind of information you're going to collect. Depends on the learning goals, the stage of the instructional process. Then determine what tools you will use to get that information. Observation could be done just by carefully studying interactions, behaviors. Is not interaction dependent. Checklist make those more objective, where you can see, did the student use 5 colors in this particular artwork? Did they include 2 different shapes? Those are related to rubrics as well. Artifact analysis, this is evidence in the information gathering process, breaks down a task into subtasks, just as I said I do with my online students in art. Can be used for tracking student progress and allows uniform collection of information. When we're also looking at that, the traditional means of assessment is paper and pencil tests, but authentic means include portfolios, demonstrations, exhibitions, and performances. If we're looking at selected response tests, the strengths of those, it's a fair assessment tool. It's fast and easy to score, can be reliable, but it doesn't always provide accurate information on understanding. It focuses on recall of information rather than higher level thinking. For constructive response, it can assess learning at all levels of complexity, can assess students' ability to organize and present information, and can be easier to create or write. Drawbacks, requires more time to grade. Scoring can be unreliable. You can have limited sampling ability. Some learning objectives may not be assessed. Quality of handwriting might affect scoring as well. Authentic assessment tasks are called performance tasks or performance-based assessments. They're more comprehensive and require applying knowledge and skills in more realistic situations. Those include demonstration and exhibition and portfolios. And when you assign value to tests, the selected response, their objective, limited variability, schools might have a grading scale. Constructive response is more prone to reader bias and subjectivity, greater variability in scores and values, and teachers should develop model answers before scoring questions. When you're assigning value to authentic assessment tasks, the nature of the task presents the greatest challenge in deciding the value of the information collected. So there's 2 considerations. What are the criteria for assessment, and what are the standards? Lots of different rubrics can be found for grading. They are very helpful, especially in online classes, to know what you're working through. Many different formats are found, descriptors for each criteria. It's challenging to determine how to assign value in a consistent way. And the other challenge is, do authentic assessment tasks provide reliable information about learning? Challenges to authentic assessment: decide before you assign the task exactly what you'll be looking for. Develop a rubric. Share the rubric with your students. Consider including as part of all projects, and plan to evaluate portfolios in small batches. You can't sit and grade 200 essays at one point. You got to do that in small batches. Grading. Grades are subject to interpretation problems. Grading from one teacher to another could be variable. Finding the average of scores can produce a grade that's not representative. You know, if a student had 80s and 90s on most of their work and then all of a sudden received a 0, that negatively affects it, but is it really a true picture of that student's learning? So you can do norm-referenced grading, criterion-referenced, or self-referenced. In norm-referenced, you're comparing to an average of a group, and criterion-referenced, we're compared to a standard, and Self-referenced, you're comparing it to your own past performance. Everyone can improve and get high grades. So, for all of you who are going to be new teachers, make sure the students know the criteria and process for grading. Base grades on multiple measures. Don't use grades for punishment for misbehavior. Keep good records of student performance and protect student privacy. Benefits of effective assessment: it's grounded in clear expected learning outcomes, communicates educational values, and communicates to the students the expectations for performance and helps improve student learning. It gives students feedback, teachers feedback, and is ongoing and continuous. And that's it for this week. And if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. Thanks.